Arizona State. Just wow. Wow, wow, wow. We were told early in the week by George Reister on Twitter through a cryptic tweet, which is beautiful. I love the art of the cryptic tweet. We were told there was a major bombshell about to break, presumably out on the West Coast, and it was on the verge of happening, and it was going to destroy a legacy. Now, immediately, a lot of attention went to Southern Cal. We were told it wasn't going to be Oregon. I did a little feeling out, got some information on it, but did not know which program it was going to be until like 6 hours before the story broke. And boy, did the story break earlier this week. It was Doug Haller with The Athletic. Bruce Feldman hopped in there. Bruce Feldman had some really good stuff on top of that. But, man, Pete Thamel's story, I'm going to read you some of it in just a second. He dropped a bombshell, and it was all just boom, boom, boom over the span of one afternoon a couple of days ago. So what I was told a few hours before it broke was what this is going to do is, once you see what the report entails, it's going to clean out an entire athletic department, an entire football department at the very least. And anytime I'm told that, I got to see it to believe it. Well, now we've seen it. I fully believe it. I don't know how anyone in that football program survives this right now. I totally agree. Just to summarize, if you're not up to speed on what happened, you remember what occurred last year. Well, we had COVID. You remember that. And then you remember the NCAA instituted dead period. It was 15 months long. And we just came out of it in June 1st. And so you couldn't do anything. You couldn't do what you normally do in the season. You could not have recruits on campus. You couldn't schedule your visits. And so it screwed a lot of programs up. Well, the only difference between most programs in Arizona State is Arizona State says, screw it. We're in Tempe. Maybe no one's watching. We're just going to do what we want to anyway. So I want to read a couple of excerpts. This is from the Pete Thamel story on Yahoo Sports. I also encourage you, if you have not already, go to The Athletic because they've got some good stuff there too. But just listen to the details. There's a word included here that I never thought we would be using within the context of college football. An anonymous person sent a dossier, there's that word, of dozens of pages to the Arizona State Athletic Department and included screenshots, receipts, pictures, emails, all related to numerous potential violations. The documentation includes specific evidence of multiple examples of high school prospects taking illicit on-campus recruiting trips. Now notice, absent in all this was the normal allegation. The normal allegation would be dollar amounts that players have been paid. That's not the allegation. Remember, the context is very, very key here. We were in a period that is called a dead period for a reason. You can't have guys on campus. Pete Thamel continues, the dossier, according to sources, lays out pieces of both the players' trips to campus and how those trips were paid for. You're probably forming a question that I think is common sense at this point. We'll get to the question in a second. Last part here. Sources said members of the football program deliberately, blatantly, and consistently broke rules related to hosting players, including Herm Edwards meeting with recruits. And that source added evidence, included pictures of visits, including, and this is not to be left in the dust, Edwards with a recruit who ended up enrolling at Arizona State. The question you should have is, how in the world did anyone get their hands on information so thorough? How did we get to a place where we have enough tangible evidence gathered of violations and impropriety that we can actually use the word dossier in college football? How did we get there? That's normally stuff you have to turn on the cable news channels to hear. Well, I'll tell you how. Disgruntled former employees. That's how that happens. In this case, coaches. Also, I think a current staffer was anonymously sourced in one of these stories, but coaches. Here was the big and blatant miscalculation that Herm Edwards made. They had done some good things out there. They had gotten some decent momentum. It really looked for all the world like this season, if they were ever going to break through, this was going to be the breakthrough year. Now we sit here on the heels of a bombshell report, or multiple reports. I don't know how in the world anyone on that staff survives, Herm Edwards or elsewhere. Antonio Pierce is the name that I think a lot of people inside our industry are throwing around, because Antonio Pierce, although not the face of Arizona State football, was actually, I think, a lot of the determining factor for why so many people were disgruntled here. You did not have to read far in these excerpts to find a lot of animus directed towards Antonio Pierce. Way too polarizing a guy, as it turns out, to be calling the shots anywhere. This is not the only program, and I want to reiterate this. This is not the only program that is even currently under investigation for this. Now, that's been whispered about for a couple of weeks. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of an investigation going, well, Firsthand, no. I don't have firsthand knowledge of an investigation going on right now. Secondhand knowledge, you do what you will with it. It's not stuff we talk about on here because secondhand knowledge will burn you badly. But I'm saying that to then caution you, just because that's true, don't expect some flood of subsequent stories. You remember that Arizona State deal? Well, how about fill in the blank university? How about so-and-so state? It may happen, but I don't know that it's just a foregone conclusion simply because there is investigation going on right now. Because what Arizona State did is two-part. Number one, well, they blatantly violated protocol and NCAA rules. But number two, they sprung so many leaks. If we did not have Antonio Pierce running things roughshod the way he was out there, then I still don't think, even given all the impropriety, that we'd have, look at all the highlight. If you're watching on YouTube, all the highlight on that piece of paper, I don't think we would have that kind of information readily available here. The only way you get that kind of information, keep in mind the investigatory body we're talking about, as we like to say around here, incapable of taking a leak without getting the front of its pants wet. The only way that the NCAA acquires that thorough amount of information is if someone who had direct knowledge of it said, here, and hands it to them. Probably, literally, on a silver platter. And so if that existed in other programs, that's one thing. I wouldn't just be so sure that existed in other programs. I think it's more likely than not that this may end up being an isolated incident in terms of you ever finding out about it. I'll tell you what else stood out before we move on, and how you know that they are a cooked noodle, Arizona State. How many people just went on record? David Shaw is a head coach in that conference. Didn't have any problem going on record. I think Schwarber, the athletic director at Notre Dame, I think the Oregon State athletic director today, they didn't even go anonymous. They just went on record, and they basically wagged their finger and said, shame on you, Arizona State. If that is ever the case publicly, it is 100-fold behind the scenes. Because you can, if you sit in the right position, you can hear a lot of these coaches and administrators privately bash each other, and then publicly at a media day setting, they praise their entire conference. And that's when they don't like each other. So for people to be publicly in the role of a head coach and athletic director, just openly bashing another university and another program, that means they've pretty much circled the wagons, and the circle of the wagons is around you, but it's not a friendly circle.